And President Joe Biden has arrived in Finland after wrapping up a NATO summit in Lithuania by emphasizing efforts to unite around Ukraine. In a meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, Biden made it clear that Ukraine's future does lie with NATO, but he says that now is simply not the best time for that membership to happen. He says it would draw other NATO countries into conflict with Russia and that Ukraine should meet certain criteria, including fighting corruption. Biden's time in Finland today will wrap up his European tour as he works with Nordic leaders to bolster security cooperation amid threats from Russia as well as China.